To get behind the wheel of a Formula 1 car, drivers must be in possession of a so-called super license. In principle, earning such a license seems quite simple. You have to earn 40 points in racing classes recognised by the FIA. In reality, however, it's quite a complex story. The FIA super license was first introduced in the early 1990s. It is kind of a mandatory driver's license that drivers must have if they want to participate in a Formula 1 World Championship. From its origins, this license was intended to ensure that drivers entering the premier class of motorsport had experience with Formula 1 cars or that they'd proven themselves in other single-seater cars. However, in recent years, the super license has often been the subject of discussion due to a change that was implemented in 2015. Since that year, drivers must have accumulated 40 points in FIA-recognised classes within a 3-year period to qualify for the super license, but more on that later. Super license requirements. In addition to these 40 points, there are a number of conditions that a driver must meet before he or she is eligible. For example, a driver must be at least 18 years old at the time of the first Grand Prix weekend in order to participate. This rule was created back in 2015, and it's often referred to as the Max Verstappen rule. The Dutchman made his debut with the Toro Rosso team at the age of just 17, and despite his immediate performances on track, not everyone was charmed by the fact that there was a teenager in the paddock. To prevent drivers from being drawn into the sport at too young an age, a minimum age was set sometime after his debut. Grade A license and driver's license. Furthermore, a driver must be in possession of an international Grade A competition license. This too is earned by fulfilling a series of conditions, especially in the lower national racing classes. Usually, however, a driver has owned these for a long time before he or she comes even close to picking up a super license. Another fairly new rule is that a driver must have a valid driver's license in his home country. Verstappen, for example, already drove around in Formula 1 when he was not yet allowed to drive on the public roads in the Netherlands. This too then has been changed. Theory exam and the necessary experience. Drivers must also successfully pass a theory test. Formula 1 has a pretty thick law book, so some knowledge is required. In addition, a driver must have competed in a single-seater championship for at least 2 years and must have completed at least 80% of the season per year. A driver must also have driven 300 kilometers in a recent Formula 1 car. This is often done through free practice sessions or test days. Super license for free practice only. In 2019, the FIA introduced a super license that allows drivers to only complete free practice sessions in Formula 1 rather than get racing on track. This is at the request of the teams in order to allow junior and reserve drivers to gain experience. This license is subject to the same requirements, except that a driver must have accumulated only 25 points in the past 3 years on their license or have completed at least 6 races in Formula 2. Penalties. A super license also immediately serves as a kind of criminal record for the drivers. If a driver commits a violation on the track, for example, by exceeding the track limits too often or making contact with another driver, the race director can add penalty points to his or her super license. The amount of points depends, of course, on the offence, often between 1 and 3. If a driver incurs 12 penalty points within 12 months, there will be a suspension for the next race. 12 months after accruing a penalty point, it expires again. So far, no driver has actually been banned from Formula 1, although Sebastian Vettel and Romain Grosjean have come very close in the past. In Formula 2, Cordial of Van Amersfoort Racing was recently penalised because he'd hit the 12-point mark, so it does actually happen. As a result, he had to miss the race at Silverstone. How much does a super license cost? Applying for a super license is anything but cheap, and the cost has gone up several times in recent years. Although the exact amount is not known, it is estimated that applying for a super license is between 10 and 20,000 euros. In addition, a super license is only valid for 12 months, so this amount must be transferred every year. But that isn't all the cost. A driver has to pay extra based on his performance in the previous season. An amount must be debited for every World Championship point scored. In 2012, this was almost 1,300 euros per point. That would mean that Verstappen paid more than 500,000 euros for his super license this year, whereas, for example, Mick Schumacher only had to pay the standard rate because Mick didn't get any points. Can a driver lose his super license? Well, a super license, of course, isn't forever. If a driver has not participated in an official Formula 1 event in 3 years, the license will be revoked. This means that a driver can spend 1 or 2 seasons on the sidelines, for example, because he or she did not manage to get a drive in F1. After this, however, it is high time to get back to work and get back in the car, because that super license could be slipping away. For more on the super license and of course the impact it's had on Colton Herta recently, get across to GPFans.com.